Hello and welcome to Real Talk, your guide to real estate success. And here are your hosts, Brian Woodward and Lauren Burpo.
And here with Real Talk, I have a super special guest. We have Tyler Clark with us, or as we like to call him, T-Money. Hello, Tyler. Thank you for joining us. Little recap on Tyler. So you got licensed at, was it 21?
I was 20.
20 years old. Yeah. So a wonderkin, if you will. And how old are you now?
I'm 24. This week is my 4th year anniversary. So yeah.
That's so cute. Oh my gosh, we couldn't have planned this any better.
I know.
Well, congratulations. What would you say got you into real estate? Give a little background on that.
Yeah, so I grew up, most of my life I was raised by a single mother, and my mother sold real estate for about 10 years, and then was a transaction coordinator in the real estate industry. So I kind of grew up with her, going on appointments. You know, the real estate office is kind of my home, that I grew up in it. So I always knew that I wanted to get into real estate at some capacity.
Yeah.
My dream was to be an architect.
That
was my dream. I love architecture. I love design. And so I got acquainted with a lot of architects at a really young age, and I just learned a lot from them, some valuable stuff, but I also learned that a lot of them hated their jobs. They were miserable. And so I was like, well, it's probably not the career field for me. So I kind of switched gears and I got into construction.
Okay.
When I graduated, I went to school for about 2.5 years. I studied under a technology center and was going to get into construction and go to school to be a construction manager. And long story short, I had a falling out with my shop teacher, and took a season off from school. And I was like, well, something's got to give. And so I was like, I'm going to try this real estate thing. So I always knew I was going to get into real estate at some capacity, but I didn't realize it was going to be sales.
Okay, interesting.
And then I got my license right before the pandemic, or right as the pandemic started, and then the rest is history. So
took off from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Tyler recently celebrated his 100th transaction.
I did.
Yes. Yeah. Congrats. What are you to now? Do you know?
Oh goodness, that was in February of this year. So probably, I don't know, probably like 110, 100. Not too much more, but
yeah, but enough more. So has it always been RE/MAX as where you planned on having your license, or did you look at any other brokerages?
Yeah, so my mother worked for Coldwell Banker back in the day, and then the office rebranded as RE/MAX. Actually, our broker Brian was her old broker.
Yeah.
So I've known Brian for a long time, but when I got into real estate school, they told us, they were like, hey, you need to start interviewing brokers and figuring out where you want to hang your license. And so obviously I met with Brian first.
Yeah.
But I told Brian, I said, don't think just because I know you, I'm going to come work here. What do you offer? What's, training and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I interviewed several other brokerages. And really what made me choose RE/MAX was the culture within this specific office. And then also when I met with Brian, one of my questions was about going part-time, because I had a really good career. I worked at Hobby Lobby corporate. I ran one of the warehouses there, and I had a full career with Hobby Lobby if I wanted it. And I was like, well, I think I'm going to work part-time and get this real estate thing going. And then once I get it going, then I'll switch over, to full-time real estate.
Right.
And every brokerage I met with, they all said, oh, yes, like we love that. We'll get you rolling, get in here, we'll get you started. And then when the time is right, you make the decision to jump over. And Brian was the only broker that said, Tyler, I think if you want to do this business, you got to do 110% or don't do it at all. That kind of shocked me, to be honest with you. That was not what I expected him to say, but he was the only broker that said that. And so honestly, it was just the honesty.
Yeah.
That he had so much belief in me that I could do this. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to go with RE/MAX because of that. Yeah. That was one of the biggest reasons.
Yeah. What other benefits do you feel like you've gotten out of joining this office specifically?
Obviously with RE/MAX Energy, it's a team model, but it's different than most team models. We're all independent agents, but we work together as a team. So I think that's huge. If I have a listing, if I have a client, my name is the sign on the sign, going in the yard, which I don't really care if people know my name, but I plan to be in this business for the long haul. And so I kind of want to build and grow my own brand around Tyler Clark, not necessarily Brian or Remax Energy. Also, just the resources that we have, we have a transaction coordinator, / office admin, which I rely on a lot for, my files, day-to-day inputting listings. I mean, I may be 24, but I'm not tech savvy. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't know what to do. The media team is nice. That way we have someone, that can shoot our own listings, do video content if we want. And I'm sure that's going to continue to grow and develop to even greater things over time, which I'm excited to see what happens with that. But the biggest thing is going back to the culture. We've got about 20 agents in our office. And I mean, every agent, like I said, we're independent, but we work together. When I went to other brokerages and I went to trainings at other brokerages, and it seemed like all the agents were working against each other. Or, if you had something that was working, you kind of kept it to yourself. You didn't share what was working. And here, I feel like everyone really, helps each other out. If I'm out of town or in a bind and I can't show a buyer, most of the agents are willing to step in and show that client with no obligation. And that's awesome, and I think that's rare because in our industry, a lot of realtors, they don't communicate, they don't work together. And it's kind of refreshing to be in an environment where people do, work together.
They support each other, and care for one another.
Yeah, so to me, that's the biggest thing. Is really when it goes back to support, that's really it. And I mean, the training is huge. I mean, I wasn't so much commission focused when I got into real estate because like I said, I'm in this for the long haul. Right. So I wanted to go somewhere that was going to offer really good training and resources that I could grow and learn how to do this business the right way and build a solid foundation. So I feel like this office definitely has that.
Speaking of things like that agents bring to the other agents to help them thrive, I think you are the number one in the office for finding something that you can add to your system and running with it and then bringing it back to all the other agents. Like a big one has been your Google form. Mm-hmm. But along with things like that, what are some things that you think really sets you apart and puts you above and beyond as more than just a realtor, but somebody they can truly go to help them navigate the process?
Yeah, I mean, I really would just say my process. I know that sounds so vague, but I have a really strict process that I take all of my clients through. And if they don't fit within my process, I don't like to work with them. I think a lot of agents, they jump in this business and they want to try to work with every single lead that they get. We've got to make money, right? Yeah. We're in this business to make money. But you have to understand that if you want to be successful, you have to have duplicatable systems and processes. And I feel like I have a pretty good process, where it comes to meeting with clients before we get out there and start looking at homes. When I list someone's house, and, I have a two-step process for getting their home on the market. And for some people, it doesn't work, and that's fine. I think what sets me apart is just being consistent in that process. I don't waver,
Right. Willing to say no to something to move on because something better is going to be there.
Exactly. And I mean, I'll say this. I'm younger. When I got in this business, I lived at home, but I paid rent. I had all my own bills, and I actually spent the day I got my license and spent my money to get my licensing fee. I was broke. I had no money to my name, no paycheck coming in the door, and I had to make this business work. Yeah. And so that was tough for me to say no to some of those first few leads that wouldn't fit within my process. But you have to be truthful to yourself and just trust the process, because if you waver and you start, changing tasks and doing things that you shouldn't be doing, then you're going to get yourself in so much more mess than you planned for.
And take up a lot of your time when you could be going after dollar productive activities is what we like to call it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that is so true.
I know some systems that you've added. One most recently that I'm really excited to talk about is the welcome home party. What are you calling those?
I haven't really put a name on it, but for a lot of my clients, when we close, most realtors give their clients a closing gift, which is fun. I don't do closing gifts. I did at the beginning and I stopped. What I like to do is throw and help someone plan a housewarming party. Not everyone does it, but
I think this is so cool.
Yeah. So basically when I close with a client, I just let them know, hey, once you get settled in, let me know, and I'd love to, help you plan. So I've got a process, right?
Yeah.
that I take them through, and there's a step-by-step way to go about doing that, and I'll plan and I fund the whole party, and it's just a cool experience, getting to just be face-to-face, not only with your clients, but their friends and family,
Yeah.
and in allowing them to kind of experience their home with them, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I really like face-to-face interactions. I feel like that's where I thrive. I'm good on the phones. I have good dialogue, but nothing beats face-to-face interactions, as they say, shaking hands, kissing babies. The thing that we do in this business is build relationships.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's no better way of doing that than face-to-face.
And he says he's good on the phone. That's such an understatement. He's phenomenal on the phone. We have calls saved that are titled like Tyler Golden Call because it's so good. And no matter how far in time it gets from when he first had that call, it's still just such a good call. And it nails everything that you need to have to be able to help somebody. And the other thing that you've been doing for your listings is a mega open house. And I know you've done some of those with Donnie, another one of our agents, the one I spoke to last month. But kind of get into that. Like, what is the process with a mega open house? And do you see the benefit from doing that?
Yeah, so mega open houses are kind of a new thing that we've introduced. I've only done a few of them, but it is a great way to launch a listing. So basically, when we put the house on the market, we typically try to list them within a Thursday or Friday, and then plan the mega open that Saturday or Sunday. So it's no different than a standard open house. You're just making it bigger, right? So for some people, this looks like a lot of different things. The biggest thing is your budget. Try to go big, but obviously don't break the bank. That's why I like to partner with other agents. So me and Donnie, we partnered on the last one to launch one of his listings, and we sent out mailers, like almost like a wedding invitation to all the neighbors. We also had a level up neighborhood that we researched.
Oh, smart.
This is basically the target neighborhood that we think someone would move from to the house that he was selling. And so we sent out invitations to not only the neighborhood that the house was in, but the level up neighborhood as well. And then we all personally called and invited those homeowners to join us for the event, blasted on social media. So like I said, there's a process to everything that we do. And when we had the event, we actually sponsored a local coffee shop, and they came in and did coffee, and we had just a spread of cheeses and kind of like a brunch and coffee kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the mega open house was huge. I think the one that we did recently, we had over probably 40, 60 people show up, which was
so
huge.
Cool.
I actually got a few clients out of that event, and it helped us get a lot of traction on our listing and get a ton of feedback, which is so valuable for your seller. I feel like open houses, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to do this open house to sell my listing, which is great, but not very rarely someone comes to an open house and they say, oh my goodness, this is the house for me, right? But the biggest thing is letting the neighbors know about the listing. And that's why I like open houses, specifically mega open houses, is because it gets people talking, and the neighbors are typically what's going to help us sell the house.
Right.
Someone who lives in the area, they might know of a friend or family member that wants to move to their area. And so what better way than to reach out to those people, So that's really the whole point of the mega. And the mega open house doesn't have to be grand. I mean, there's some agents in luxury markets that are, having food trucks come in and, live bands and stuff like that. That's cool. But in some markets, that's just unrealistic,
Right.
And going back to systems and processes, if it's going to work, it has to be duplicatable for everyone, with every budget.
Right. Yeah. So keeping it fair.
just stupid simple.
And usable every single time.
Yeah.
No, that's cool that you got clients already off of it, though. Have any of them closed, or are you still working with them?
I'm still working with some of them. They're just nurture clients right now. Most of my business is nurture leads, nurture people. I work with a lot of first-time home buyers that may not necessarily be ready to move right now, but they're in a lease term, and they might be looking in 6 months to a year. And so, I mean, I've got to eat 6 months to a year from now. So those clients,
and they gotta buy.
Exactly. So those type of clients I love, because you have 6 months to a year to nurture them and build relationships and deepen that relationship. So that way, not only are you their realtor, but you are their friend. You know what I'm saying? So that's huge for me.
Yeah. And I know in the beginning you helped a lot of renters, even
Mm-hmm.
though like getting them into a rental and then following up with them through that process to see if they were ready to buy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And turned a lot of those into clients.
Yeah, I mean, when I got into real estate, we had a property management company that we were affiliated with, and I showed a lot of rentals. Didn't pay a lot, but I was in it for the long haul, and I loved on those people, you know, put them into my aftercare program and just stayed in touch. And eventually, when their lease was up, they were ready to buy. And I think this last year, I mean, there was probably 6 or 7 clients that I helped buy homes just off of rentals, which is huge.
That is, to be able to convert those people, and not even just convert them, like see the dollar that comes out of it, but genuinely be able to help people go from renting to purchasing is a big deal. Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, right now, housing is expensive. You know, there's no negating that fact. The biggest thing is just allowing people to, you know, show them a process that they can get into to have a path to home ownership. I think is so big.
I agree. And speaking of the path to ownership, you know, we have consultations here is what we prefer to do. So like your listing consultation and your buyer consultation to go over the process. One of the things that you're really great at is breaking down step by step what people can expect. Mm-hmm. And so can you kind of go into what a consultation with you looks like? Like what are the things that you really want to make sure you hit on?
Good question. So when I meet with a buyer and have a buyer's consultation, you know, the biggest thing is to help that customer have a game plan to home ownership. So that looks different for everyone, whether they've bought their first home or whether they've bought 10 homes. I take everyone through the same process, right? So it all starts with us sitting down and having a consultation. During that consultation, I want to identify like what their situation is, where they're sitting, you know, what their plan is to buy, their financial situation, right? I always tell people, as your realtor, I'm kind of like your attorney. I need to know all about your business, but I don't share people your business. Right. So really that's the whole purpose of the consultation. It's a discovery, but also my job as a realtor is to educate people. Yeah. So that way they can make well-informed decisions about the purchase. And so the biggest part of my consultation is educating people about the process, how it works, what to expect. Because here's the thing, we as realtors, we do this business every day, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people buy maybe 2, maybe 3 homes in their lifetime. So they don't do it every day. And things change. You know, when my mother sold real estate back in the late 90s, early 2000s, real estate was done way different then. And so if you have a client that bought back in 2000s, they're going to have no idea what to expect when they go into a transaction now. And so that's why I slow down during that process and walk them through the steps. So the first part of my consultation is just building rapport, diving into their wants and needs. So that way I'm on the same page about what they're looking for, regardless if they're ready now or not. Mm-hmm. I still want to know what they like in a house, right? And then we walk them through the process, basically what to expect from start to finish, go over their financial parameters, figuring out their budget, and also you know, there's some upfront costs and expenses when it comes to buying a home. And so a lot of people don't think about that, and they need to be ready for those when they come. So it just comes down to educating people on those things and making sure that they understand what is expected of them. Right. Because at the end of the day, it's their decision what they want to do.
Right. Yeah. You can't force anybody to buy a house.
No.
Yeah.
But I want them to know exactly what they can expect. And it sounds crazy, but I've met with some people and they're like, this is a lot. I don't think I want to buy a house. And I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah, you know, that's okay.
That's great.
At least you know now.
Yeah. That means they're not ready, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of people I meet with, they find out that it's a lot easier than they thought, right? And just having the time to spend with the customer and slowing down and walking them through those steps really helps ease a lot of their concerns and let them know that, you know, this is doable. Yeah. You know, even if they are a first-time home buyer, it's not as scary as it seems to become a homeowner.
Yeah.
You know,
especially to have somebody that'll sit down with them from the get-go, explain the process, and guarantee that, like, I am here for you. I will hold your hand through this.
Yeah. Well, and like to piggyback off of that, you know, with the changes in our industry, with the buyer-broker agreement that we're required to have when we work with the customer, you know, a lot of buyers are really hesitant to sign those agreements. because it's hard for them to commit to someone they don't know. I mean, and I completely get that. And so my job is to show them my value, what I can do for them. I'm an advocate for my customer, but how am I going to advocate them if I didn't at least sit down and give them the time of day to walk them through my process, what I do to serve their needs, look out for their best interests. So the consultation is kind of a 50-50. It's really to show my worth and to educate them on, what I can expect of them.
Yeah, and find out how to help them.
Exactly,
Truly.
Yeah. Because there's no one size fits all, That's kind of my consultation.
Would you say from the beginning, and I'm sure things have like slowly morphed as you go along, as they do when people work in this industry, but would you say each time that you did a consultation, there was something more that you figured out like, ooh, I should add that in there? Or, ooh, I should do this a little bit differently?
So my very first consultation that I did, honestly, I don't even remember how it went. It probably wasn't great. But I just kind of winged it. And I found a training packet, one of the packets that we use. I think it's the Momentum Training.
Yeah.
I copied that presentation word for word. I mean, I read it through, memorized every line, and I did it exactly like that said. Very scripted, right? Until I could kind of make it my own.
Right, get comfortable with it. Yeah.
And I guess it just comes with experience and internalizing the dialogue. But as far as things that I've added throughout the years, it really hasn't changed too much. There's really 3 parts of the consultation. It's just discovery, figuring out what they're looking for, education, teaching them about the process, and then obviously you want to ask them for a commitment. I don't work with the client unless they agree to work exclusively with me, right? The biggest thing I've added really is just the Google form that I use. I have a Google form that has just some basic questions about what they're looking for in a house, which is what we go over during the consultation. But before, I used to have them fill it out up first, like while I was sitting here. It was really awkward because they didn't know, or maybe the spouse, if it was a couple, they didn't discuss.
They hadn't communicated.
Yeah, they might not be on the same page. Yeah. I didn't want to put them on the spot, know. So that Google form is great because I can send that to them ahead of time and say, hey, would you fill this out before we meet? Yeah. And it gives them time to sit down together, and they can just sit there and go through it together and talk and brainstorm on what they really want. And there's a lot of questions in my Google form that most people might not think of when they're searching for a home, right? Mm-hmm. They may think of what they want in a house, but as far as like getting pre-qualified and, what's their process of going to look at homes, a lot of people don't know that. And so those type of questions I think are huge to ask a potential client because it gets them thinking, right?
And it helps them come up with questions, I think, too. Do you find that since you're spending so much time on the front end educating, do you find that throughout the process it runs smoother because you've done that?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah. I mean, you're always going to have some difficult clients, right? But most of my customers, I mean, I do so much work up front, educating them and going over process and getting a plan together. So that way, the second we find a house, they know. I always feel like if a client messages me and asks questions throughout the process, then I know, I probably didn't do a good enough job of explaining, right? I don't want my customers messaging me, asking me, hey, what's next? I want them to know. Or I should have already pre-explained that to them before they
next steps are this. Yeah.
I think setting expectations is so huge in our industry. But yeah, that's probably what I'd say on that.
So that's the buyer side. How do you feel on the listing side? Things that you do differently or how you go above and beyond for those people? Because you have a lot of listings. I feel like this year has been a big listing year for you.
Yeah, I feel like I flip-flop. I'll be really listing heavy and then really buyer heavy. But for listing side, I have a 2-step process. I know some realtors, they just go out and go over the numbers and wing it the first try. I just don't see how anyone can do that. But the first thing that I do when I list someone's house is I go out and see the house. My first appointment is really like 10, 15 minutes. I'm just there to see the house, get my eyes on it, find out what they've done to it since they've lived there, and get to know them a little bit more. These are strangers, maybe. I don't know them. When people are selling a home, you have to invite someone into your house, and it's a very vulnerable experience. And so I think slowing that process down, it kind of eases their expectations of that and their concerns, But the first step is for me to really just go out there and meet them and see the house. And then I don't even look at numbers while I'm out there. I just go get as much data and information as I can, and I come back to the office and I run numbers and do all my research on the back end of that first appointment. Now, I do set a second appointment when I'm there to go back out and meet with them to go over all the numbers. And so by the time I'm meeting them for the second appointment, one, I already know them. I kind of have a general idea of what their plan is, what their goal is with the sale. And then I have tons of ammunition to go in there and not necessarily sell myself, but to show them, hey, here's the price that I'm recommending we sell your house, and here's why.
Right.
I'm not just going out there and throwing a number out of left field.
That you think they'll like to hear, but truly.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Tyler, for spending time with me and going over this. This has been really helpful.
You.
Yeah, and I know agents will be excited to hear this, but my last question I had is, what is something that you wish you knew on day one?
Ooh, on day one.
On day one.
I would say just be teachable. I mean, I feel like one of the reasons I've been so successful is just because I was teachable. There's a lot of things that you can do in this industry to get business. Everything works. That's the bad
That's the
part.
hard part.
That's the bad thing is everything works. You know, you have some people that do FISBOs and some people do expireds. Some people strictly build their business off of open houses. Some people cold call, right? It all works. But you have to find what works for you, and that might take time. But the biggest thing is try not to get stuck jumping in between different ways to generate business, right?
Yeah.
I've heard some people call it a tweener, right? Kind of jumping in between things. For me, I quickly identified 3 ways that I was going to establish my business. For everyone, regardless of how good you are as far as communicating, if you're an introvert, extrovert, for everyone, your number one should be your sphere of influence. Your friends, your family, past work colleagues, your church family. I mean, anyone in your circle. That should be your number one way to grow your business, right? And you have to have a sphere to last in this business. And if you don't build a sphere-based business, you're going to be chasing leads your whole life, and that's going to be exhausting. But just find 2 other ways that you feel you'd be interested in and that you do well.
And consistently.
And be consistently at, yeah. So for me, that was open houses, just because I like looking at houses and I like talking to people. I'm good face-to-face. And the other one was really just online leads. You know, we have a lot of leads that come into the office, but being consistent and following up with those leads, I think is part of that. But as far as day one, like I said, pick 3 things that you're going to do and just stick to those. And listen, you might be a year down the road and if one ain't working, you know, give it a year, at least 12 months doing that one thing. And if it's not working or if you don't feel like you like it, then switch it. So like open houses is something I did. I don't do them much anymore. Not because they don't work. I want my weekends back, right? And so I had to find something else to replace that. And there's no shame in that. You just have to find what works for you.
All right, a big thank you for being here and for speaking with me. And I'm sorry we couldn't talk longer. We'll have to charge our camera more often. But I appreciate you.
Yeah.
This has been an absolute delight. And do you have any final thoughts for anybody?
I would just say, you know, to like new agents getting into industry, the biggest thing is I think a lot of agents, they focus so much on their commission or the split that the brokerages are providing, which is important. I mean, regardless of your why and why you're getting in this business, at the end of the day, we're business owners.
Right.
So we're in this to make money. Money's not the most important thing, but it's right out there with oxygen. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
I like that.
But, you know, splits are important. However, I think try to focus on what resources and training is being offered to you by your agent or by your brokerage. To me, I think that's the most important thing to focus on if you're new to the industry, because you know you might be able to go to a brokerage that will pay you a lot higher split, but I would much rather sell 20, 30 homes a year at a lower commission, you know, than 80, 90% of nothing.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that would be the biggest thing is just try to affiliate yourself with a brokerage that has a good brand and that's going to train you and, you know.
And provides value.
You just listened to an episode of Real Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on your preferred streaming platform and follow us on socials for more content. We hope you have a good day, and we'll see you next time.